Okay, thank you and good morning. Peter already gave all the basic things about in terms of urban fabrics and the theory. So in a way, I'm repeating, but I have a bit different attitudes because I'm an architect. I've been living in a smaller city, so my scale is smaller. My way of thinking is based on a long experience in urban planning. I've been working as an urban planner for 40 years. I have had a different way of thinking for 25 years, and I have been using the model which can recognize these fabrics. I have had also several findings on theoretical level, and in my work, all the theoretical findings I had to test in practice, because every time I found something, so next week there was someone asking, what do you mean? How do we implement it? Peter Newman, as you heard, he's very experienced in theory, global cities. He's been using the same type of model, but he has also a long practice in local questions. So, in a way, we have very much in common, and especially the model. Basically, the models are showing that our way of thinking is very parallel, and it's been very useful to meet Peter and to have discussions with him. The basic thing is that we need a new way of thinking. I faced it quite early in my work. You all know this present way of thinking. It's based on old ideas of a new city 60, 70 years ago. Everybody can recognize these three functions: housing, employment, recreation, and a traffic, which is combining these functions. Actually, they are not functions, they are land use categories. Actually, we have a pattern of two main systems to analyze our cities, and we have two types of models. We have land use models and traffic models, network models. And that's, in a way, that's quite a strange situation, because the cities, as Peter was showing, the cities consist of, they are a combination of three fabrics, three comprehensive systems. And we try to analyze and supervise this kind of combination of three systems with tools which are based on two systems which don't recognize this basic three systems. So I found it's a very strange situation, and in practice it can be used mainly to analyze and improve the car city fabric. And afterwards, I already understood that there's no comprehensive theory behind these models or behind this way of thinking. And so these tools were not useful when my task was to understand what's happening in terms of car city development, how to analyze it, how to deal with it. And that's the basis of new way of thinking and need new way of thinking. So actually this way of thinking has been a serious mistake. And it has led to serious mistakes. They are useful in the way when this way of thinking is combined to incremental thinking. So it can lead to really nice, innovative solutions. But we have seen that it has led also to really bad mistakes. Okay, so need of new thinking. First of all, it's important to recognize that these fabrics exist. As Peter was showing this in in history we have faced several waves of innovation which have influenced our cities, and in terms of the fabrics you can clearly see the stages of the history of fabrics. So that the first stage is walking city, which is the oldest one, and the first stages of the transit city. They were quite clearly distinguished, or there are some theorists who have distinguished them. For instance, Peter Hall is mentioning two stages of a public transport city, the early stage and the later stage. So in terms of these periods, these two systems are recognized. But then the third one, which is now the situation, we have walking city, transit city and car city fabrics. That's something which has not been recognized. And maybe one of the explanations is that there's in a way, combination of car city fabric, which was different from the previous ones. It was not growing only on the sides of the previous fabric, but it started to grow over the previous fabric. So it was covering the whole, from the very beginning, it was covering the whole city. And the ideas of the modern city, they were also orientating towards future. A new city which would be totally different from the old industrial walking city and old congested transit city. It would be totally new city, and these two things, car city fabric overlapping to the old fabrics, and the way of thinking that we will face, or we are building a new modern city. When these were combined, so everybody seemed to have forgotten that this transit city and walking city fabrics exist. Marchetti Constant, he made very tangible conclusions about walking distance, 2 kilometers, extent of tram systems up to 7 kilometers, and subways, cars up to 15, 20 kilometers. And that's something which I, in my work, recognized. The same thing already some 20 years ago, when I've been working in Kuopio. The same phenomenon could be recognized also in my case study cities, which I have in this urban fabric project, which I've been doing. And it was quite clearly distinguished. The walking city fabric in the middle, within the distance of 2 kilometers, intensive parts within the distance of 1 kilometer, and then the red areas are areas of the transit city fabric, yellow areas are the areas of the car city fabric. And once you have recognized the areas, then you could start analyze them and follow them. And for instance, this is following the data about car ownership, showing that this blue, green and red areas, they are clearly areas of one car or carless households. Half of the households, for instance, in the city, walking city, are without a car. And then, on the other hand, the car city fabric is clearly a fabric of two cars or two or more cars. The same phenomenon could be seen when I was analyzing these 4 case study cities. They have clearly same type of structure. Of course, there are differences, but basically it's the same. I was analyzing also the stages of development. The old walking city was clearly distinguished, and when the transit city started to grow, the car city fabric was even faster. So here, for instance, in Kuopio, at the same time that we had the first units of the transit city fabric, we already had a freeway bringing people from both sides, from both municipalities, from north and south, to the city center, even if we didn't have cars. The next stage was construction of the transit city fabric into to full extent, and the next stages have been construction of both transit city fabric and car city fabric. And that has happened in all these four cities. So from these case study cities, I came to more and more convinced that it is 2 kilometers and 8 kilometers. Actually, earlier I thought it's 10 kilometers, but based on the case study cities, it's quite clear that 8 kilometers is the width of the inner transit city fabric. And once these circles were discovered, so when I've been testing it in other documentation like this urban zone documentation, so it looks that it's functioning in smaller cities, smaller towns and bigger cities. And when testing in international documentation, so it's the same result. And very valuable documentation is this international source book that Peter and Jen Kenworthy have compiled. I could use all the maps and data of that survey. It's an important documentation, and actually for me it's the only documentation that I could find about what has happened during the last 50 years in terms of walking city fabric and transit city fabric. And these were clearly showing the same distances, 2 kilometers for the walking city fabric, 8 kilometers for the inner transit city fabric, and about 20 kilometers for the outer transit city fabric. It could be seen from the basic maps, but very clearly from the special maps which had the documentation of transit systems in these case study cities or global cities. And from this data, you could see the basic development, what has happened in terms of fabrics, the inner transit city fabric, which has been strong. It has lost a lot of population because of increase in the living space standard. The car city fabric has been growing, but the basic thing is that in addition to that data, we are missing clearly surveys which would tell the history of the car city fabric or history of the transit city fabric since 1920 or 1930. I made a small survey to get some understanding about the state of cities at the moment, and this is a collection of cities which are more than 150,000 inhabitants in Europe, in Canada, Australia and USA, and it's been classified according to their transit systems. This shows that all the big cities seem to have a rail system, metro or light rail system, and then there are several cities, a lot of cities in Europe which have rail systems. Tram systems can be found in Europe. Actually, there are quite many, about 60 cities that have a tram system, but that's quite small number compared to the number of cities which used to have a tram system. It was really a surprise for me to notice that there has been 500 cities in Europe which have had tram systems. So it's more than 400 systems have been closed. On the other hand, they have the fabric existing, so that's the potential for new tram systems or light rail systems, or many of the new light rail systems are based on the former fabric of trams now being extended. But anyway, the problem is that this kind of data, this kind of surveys are missing. From this you can see one thing which I feel that's something people don't recognize is that most of the cities, even if they are bigger than 150,000 inhabitants, their public transport is based on bus systems. And when you take all the cities, so it's huge more potential or need for bus systems for the cities if they want to change their fabric, if they want to have a proper transit city fabric in the city. So the first thing is that they need a bus system for the bus system. So buses are not disappearing like carless people were not disappearing. So buses are not disappearing. They are important now and they are important in the future. Okay, conclusion, even if the documentation is not very large, so we have a lot of information, data, maps, making conclusions about the basic model combining the previous ones. And these are our conclusions about the dimensions, basic dimensions of the fabrics. Walking city fabric is within the radius of 2 kilometers, so that the intensive part is usually within 1 kilometer. But in big cities or cities like Helsinki, where walking and transit based on trams are very closely combined, so the kind of combined walking and transit city fabric can extend up to even up to 5 kilometers, like in Paris or London. And then there are sub-centers, edge cities, which have their own walking fabrics or walking city fabrics. Transit city fabric based on trams and basic bus lanes. It seems to be ending up to 8 kilometers. There are trams which go longer than 8 kilometers, for instance, in former socialist countries when they have straight tram lines and ulitsas where trams can go fast, but then there are a lot of systems where trams extend only up to 5 kilometers. But this 8 kilometers is good diameter or good scale to analyze the inner transit city fabric. Outer transit city fabric, there's two types of outer transit city fabric. One which is based on fast express bus lanes or busways, and then the other, which means rail, which gives the proper capacity for the outer transit city fabric, and it also gives potential for feeder bus lanes. So basically, outer transit city fabric is either strings of pearls of stations, of railway stations, but then there can be edge cities or bigger units which have also feeder lines. Car city fabric, usually you recognize the areas which are car dependent, which are outside the walking and transit city fabric. That can be clearly recognized. It's much more difficult to recognize rest of the car city fabric, and that's important to understand. The car city fabric is covering the whole city. It's covering also the areas of the transit city fabric, areas of the walking city fabric. So in the model that we are compiling and using is not only a zone model. It's a model of 3 comprehensive systems, and they are overlapping, and they have got mixed with each other. And so cities of different types, they are, as Peter was showing, they are combinations of these 3 fabrics in different ratios. Here are some examples how this basic model, which we feel that this can be a basic global model, this type of model can be used for comparison of any city in the world, of any size, of any type. using these basic circles, distances, and classifications of the areas. If you look at the traditional models, so actually, for me, I don't know why, but it was a surprise to notice that, understand that this car density and model of Ebenezer Howard, it's not a regional model, it's a city model, and it's a model of walking cities. And actually, it's very good model. So in terms of walking distances, the central unit is within the radius of 2 kilometers. The actual car density unit is within the distance of radius of 1 kilometer. So it's a good walking city unit. And I think that's really many times misunderstood. The same way, if you look at the first transit city models, so the linear city from Arturo Soria y Mata, also you get from books, you get an impression that this is a model of a city. But actually it's not a model of a city, it's a model of one finger of the inner transit city fabric. And it's a good model because it has proper dimension. The next example is the neighborhood based on rail, a rail-based neighborhood unit from Stockholm, 1945. It's even more compact than this walking city of Ebenezer Howard. So they understood that the walking distance in a transit city unit is even shorter than in a proper walking city. And when we take the scale of the car cities, so we see that the scale is totally different. This is showing transit plan of Ottawa, 1978, which is clever plan how to arrange bus transit in the city. There are the basic bus lanes which are serving the inner transit city fabric that is existing in Ottawa. And then there are these bus lanes and feeder buses serving the car city fabric with feeder buses on both sides. And still one example, Milton Keynes, which is also very easily mixed to the compact models. Actually, it's a town or city which has dimensions of inner transit city fabric, but as can be seen, it's not quite proper transit city. It's more mixture of car city and transit city fabrics. Some examples in a smaller scale. The same model from Arturo Soria y Mata when the first trams had just started to run in St. Petersburg. So he made a model about this transit city, and he's using a walking distance of 250 meters. So he was very realistic because that's my experience on what is the proper walking distance in terms of transit city fabric. The same can be found in Vauban, in Freiburg, the same distance, 250 meters, but the difference is that now it's not only a line of tram stops, it's a neighborhood which has its own services. And this example from Stockholm, rail-based neighborhood, the walking distance here is long 400 or up to 600 meters. That's our experience, for instance, in Helsinki. I think Myyrmäki people in Finland know it has about the same dimensioning. It goes up to 800 meters, but it's clearly the maximum walking distance, which is still walkable. If it's bigger, then you need feeder buses or some other other systems. I come from a bus city, so I'm interested in walking distance in a bus city, visiting from Kuopio, and our experience is that the good walking distance to bus stop is 250 meters, the same as with trams. But then when I analyze the other cities, so it's very common to have the system of the super clocks or precincts which are about 1 kilometer wide, like in Milton Keynes, and that means that when buses are going along the main roads, so the walking distances, either they get long or there's proper walking distances only on the sides. And you can see it from the practice if you look at these kind of areas, so they are clearly part of the car city fabric, even if there's buses running on both sides, but they are running too far. The same kind of phenomenon I think I can distinguish in for instance, in Almere, which is an excellent place in terms of the rail transit and fabric, but then the other part of the fabric, which is the area of feeder buses, so that's clearly part of the car city fabric, or dimensioning is the dimension of the car city fabric. Okay, then some words about the model. It's not only the areas, distances, it's also elements and qualities. And I have made, or we have made with Peter, we have made a list of several elements classifying, and they can be clearly classified so that there are certain elements which are typical for walking city fabric, elements which are typical for transit city fabric, and elements which are typical for car city fabric, so that they can be found in the other areas fabrics only occasionally or for special reason. And that there's clear connections so that elements of the walking city and transit city fabric are in many times in close symbiosis, whereas elements of the car city are conflicting, especially with the elements of the transit city fabric, but also with the elements of the walking city fabric. But even after that, you must notice that there's also elements of car city fabric and transit city fabric which can operate or function in a close symbiosis, and there are mixtures of all these fabrics, mixtures of walking and transit city fabrics, and mixtures of transit and car city fabrics. So all these things should be recognized and understood and taken into account when you use this kind of models. But this opens potential or ways how you can enter to real questions once you realize this. Okay, now when I've been speaking about the model, so I've been mainly speaking about how it can be used for analysis. But the same way of thinking, the same model can and must be used also to set targets, to make future plans, to make models, and they are in continuous connection with each other. Peter was speaking about a new theory, so I show what's that? Simplification, the way I see the basic things of the theory. So as I've been explaining, or we've been explaining, it's important to recognize, understand all these three fabrics, to have an analysis model which can recognize all these three systems. We must have future models which can deal with all these three systems in terms of repair and regeneration, and then we must have the way of thinking which is guiding the use of both of these systems. So the respect of all these fabrics must be based on sustainable thinking, thinking which is based on ideas of sustainable city. And this urban theory, urban fabrics theory should cover all these aspects. It should be a comprehensive theory. Thus we are heading towards, and Peter has clear understanding of what it is now. It's only the question to write it down and show it clearly. Okay, about the future models, one thing is that this kind of thinking can be used in a tangible way to see not only what has happened and what's the situation. Like here, one of our case study cities, here's the development in terms of population, number of population in the walking city fabric, transit city fabric, and car city fabric from 1960 to 2008. And based on this, we can make scenarios for the future. Positive scenario, which is based on the continuous growth of walking and transit city fabrics, and so the need of car city fabric would decline. And the negative scenario, which is very possible, so that the transit city fabric, which is not all in good condition, it could turn into decline, and this would lead to a quite huge need of new car city fabric, so that the city could grow, continue to grow. So actually, even if it seems that there's not so much to do with the existing fabric, so it's especially the transit city fabric, where you have really big potential and also big challenges. What should be done with the existing fabric and with the new fabric? And especially when you take these global challenges into account, oil peaking and local demands in terms of health the city and so on. My experience, I have been using this tool for 20 years, and my experience is that this walking and transit city fabrics have good potential to face these challenges, whereas car city fabric is problematic, and it's quite obvious that it will face more problems. I have now time. How much time do I have? Not too much. 5 minutes. Okay. So to the end, I still show some examples about how I've been using this in practice in my city. So we have had this kind of finger model defining the goals of how to develop the walking and transit city fabrics in relation to car city fabric. And based on that, we have made a new pedestrian center, which is now still under construction, but will be one of the most extensive and I think best one in Finland. We have a special network of alleys like they have in Melbourne. In Melbourne, they have been turning them to pedestrian streets. We have been turning all these alleys to pedestrian streets or pedestrian alleys, and so we have a network of for pedestrians, which is the total length is 10 kilometers, covering the whole walking city area. And it's not only the alleys which have been removed, the cars have been removed and they have been turned to pedestrian access. We have also had quite extensive new housing production, new type of housing which is orientated towards walking city fabric, or implementing the walking city fabric with closed courtyards, no cars. Parking requirements were lowered so that the parking are underground, and we have continued with the small alleys. The other example is about the transit city fabric. We have these fingers are based on old chains of neighborhoods, but the neighborhoods are very small. For instance, this one is only 2,500 inhabitants, so it's too small to maintain a proper bus transit. So we had a project to extend it with a new development of 1,300 inhabitants. We were using special means so that we have here a bus bridge combining the area, and the design of the area is bus oriented, so that the buses are going in the middle. People have only from 50 to 150 meters to go to the bus stop. And it's been taken into active use, so it's been used now for 15, more than 20 years, and our experience almost 13 years, and we have been following the bus use, and our data is showing that people are using buses in the new area even in a more active way than in old areas, which is quite exceptional. The third example is a quite large development project. We call it District of Islands. It's a combination of a new type of a road, which is located into a beautiful landscape so that it don't destroy it, but it makes it part of the walking city fabric, or extension of the walking city fabric. Recreational area, good pedestrian, good cycling connection to the new areas, and the new development is the core of it is a bus-oriented development of 5, we call it string of pearls, 5 units which are combined with good bus transit. And this bus-oriented development here of 8,000 inhabitants, it's been combined to existing car city areas of the car city fabric, so that they can function in the symbiosis, so that also the car city fabric has good bus transit using the same bus lines as the transit city fabric. Before we made that, we had to make an environmental impact assessment, and one part of it was the economy and of the transportation and the gas house emissions, and the assessment was showing that this model, which is oriented towards transit city fabric, when it was compared to the model which was based on conventional car city fabric, it will lead to reduction of all of it, the cost of energy in traffic of the new areas, and gas house emissions will be 50% smaller than they would have been if we wouldn't have had this bridge and the new connection and this type of urban fabric. So for me, this is of course this was a big work and good project, but it's clearly an example which is telling that once you understand the fabrics, once you respect, and once you can know how to deal with these fabrics and elements of fabrics, so with the same money you can save really a lot of things and reach results. More of this documentation can be found on these web pages with us, which are a tool of this Urban Fabrics project. It's not completed yet, but we are going to fill it during next months and maybe next years. Thank you.